Hey, welcome to Brighter Rays. This week we are looking at a study from Job 1:8. Actually, we're doing a whole study on spiritual warfare for the next 6 weeks. And we're going to look at Job 1:8. And then we'll be looking at Matthew chapter 4 with the temptation of Christ in the wilderness. So this week we're doing a study called Have You Considered My Servants? And so that's kind of what we're going with this week. So, regardless of what we think about the spiritual state of our country, it is interesting that a majority of Americans still believe in the devil. They believe in Satan as a real entity, as a real being. Polls over the last 20 years show that belief in Satan is still a part of our Western culture. Of course, there is a wide range of beliefs concerning him, but there's just as many wide beliefs about God, too. But many people acknowledge that there is the presence of the adversary. Now, if you look at our media, we must admit that our culture is very confused on the topic. There are many voices in the marketplace of ideas, and they're saying very different things. Science has declared that God and Satan are dead. The spiritual is just a chemical reaction within the brain as it attempts to process the stimuli around it. On the other hand, you have the ever-popular horror genre, which often portrays the demonic and capitalizes on the innate knowledge that pure evil does exist. You have modern-day Jews who have relegated the person of Satan to a parable, while Protestant Christians say he is a real person. Then you have Muslims who, the majority, deny the existence of Satan, but at the same time believe in evil spirits and demon possession, and they believe that even more so than most Protestants and Catholics today. Now, over the next 6 weeks, we're going to take some time to study the topic of spiritual warfare. For the first 3 weeks, we'll examine Satan and how he works, and then we'll turn to look at the weapon we have been given to defend ourselves, which is the mighty Word of God. Now, in this week's study, we're going to spend our time on 2 points. Most of our time is going to be spent on what God says to Satan in the book of Job, consider my servant. How does Satan consider God's servants? We'll begin to answer that question, and then we'll try to answer the question of why does God allow this to happen? So first we need to go to the book of Job. There are several places in the Bible where God allows us to peer into the invisible. We often do not see the activities of the supernatural, but the book of Job is one place where we can see beyond the veil. The book of Job opens with a description of the man himself. He was a God-fearing man and did not indulge in evil. Job was a family man and had been blessed with 10 children. Job was a wealthy man, which is reflected in the number of animals and servants that he had. He was the wealthiest man in the East. Job was also a religious man who would consecrate his children and offer sacrifices on their behalf in case they sinned and cursed God in their hearts. With this description of Job, we complete the story change. The story changes scenes here. So you have the description of Job, and then the story quickly changes. The scene begins to go into heaven then, because it talks about who Job is, this guy on earth, and then we go quickly to the throne room of heaven. Now, starting in verse 6 of chapter 1, we're told of a dialogue between Satan, whose name means accuser or adversary, and Yahweh God. Satan comes before God and presents himself. And God asks Satan, where you came from. And Satan says that he was going to and fro on the earth and walking up and down on it. Now, what Satan means is that he has been doing whatever he wants to do on earth, and no one has put up a fight. No one's really pushing back. But that's when God says to Satan, well, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Well, Satan's rebuttal is that the reason why Job follows God and not him is that God has protected him and has made him prosper on every side. So why wouldn't Job follow God? He says, remove the protection, and Job will follow the devil as everyone else. Well, God gives Satan permission to do whatever he wants to, everything Job has, but he cannot do anything to Job himself. Satan takes the challenge, and at the opportune time, he attacks. In one day he destroys all of Job's animals and the servants that cared for them, which effectively destroyed all of Job's wealth. He was now a poor man. He was not the richest man in the East. Then Satan turned and killed all of Job's children. So in one day, Job went from being the wealthiest man with many heirs to being poor and childless. But in all this, Job does not turn against God. Now, sometime later, Satan goes before the Lord again, and again he boasts that he has sway over the earth. He has a sway over everyone on the earth. And God reminds Satan that Job, despite the great loss, has remained faithful. So Satan proposes that the reason why he hasn't turned is because he still has his health. Remove health, Job will fold like everyone else. Well, God gives permission to Satan to physically harm him, but not to kill him. And so Satan does, and he fills Job's body with disease. But as the word says, in all this, Job does not sin with his lips. And so that's the beginning of the story of Job. And it's really a story about, not so much about Job, but it's about God. If we just think about Job, then we're missing the point. I mean, the story's not about us either. It's not human. And, it's not about the man, really. It's not about Job himself, even though there's the talking and the friends and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, it's telling us about who God is. And so we need to remember that, because we can get all caught up in, what are we supposed to learn from this about what are we supposed to do? Well, there are lessons we can learn from this story, and the story's not ultimately about us. None of the Bible's ultimately about us. It's about Jesus. And if it's about people at all, it's about how they relate to him. And it's not solely about them. So we got to keep that in mind as we go through the story, as we look at it for the next couple weeks here. That story's not about us. It's about him. So come back next time and we'll begin to look at this text here, verse 8 of chapter 1 of Job, and see what does Satan consider when he is told by God to consider Job. So what does Satan consider?